Hello and welcome to Oddspedia Premier League Matchday 5. Yes, we are waiting to this match day because we have Man City, Arsenal. It's been a tough week for Arsenal, beating Tottenham in the North London derby, playing Champions League, and now the game of the games, Tom Rennie, Man City, Arsenal. Hello.
Hello, yeah. I mean, what a massive game, right? It's so early in the season, and Tottenham passed a massive test last week, winning away at Tottenham. Arsenal did even, but in the end, I think if you're going to be champions, you've got to beat Man City. You've got to beat them twice, and if they don't beat them this weekend, it's too grandiose to say the title race is over. But if they don't beat them this weekend, the title race is over.
Well, last season you were spot on. They played a really defensive game playing for the draw. They got the draw and they didn't win the Premier League at the end. So let's see what is Arteta's approach with a new extension in his contract and with many other interesting games. So as always, guys, remember to leave your comments. For instance, Duranto scored Aston Villa. Tom was spot on last week. So don't forget to subscribe to know when we are posting more videos. And now let's go on with the show. And it's going to be a tough weekend, in my opinion, for tips, Tom, and could be a good one for betting because the odds are so high this weekend. The first game, West Ham, Chelsea was so lucky beating Bournemouth. They deserved to lose. Robert Sanchez was the best player on the pitch. And at the end, 𝐿𝐭𝐴 scored the winner. Is a nightmare betting on Chelsea's games. Let's see, Tom, if West Ham is able to get some points finally at home after two defeats. Their performance against Fulham was a bit disappointing.
Yeah, poor, I would say. And that's almost generous to say it was disappointing against Fulham. I think West Ham are, look, it's a new manager and they want to make some changes, but it's not like a revolution of the wheel, right? 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏 is not this wild offensive manager compared to David Moyes, who was a wild defensive manager. So, you know, they're trying to play through the thirds more. But the moment they came out against Fulham last week with Alvarez, Rodriguez and Souček as the midfield three, I just thought that's not going to work. Because you don't have a progressive passer in that trio of players. If you ever got a progressive partner, a passer, but you've got runners, which is Kudus and Bowen and Antonio first half, it isn't going to work. And at halftime, to be fair to 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏, you realised that, made changes at halftime, brought on 𝐸𝐵𝐿 and there was another player, I think, as well. 𝐸𝐨𝐵𝐿 came on later. And they were able to start getting the ball forward, but they were outplayed by Fulham for long spells. So some concerns about West Ham. I still feel in the round quite confident of them having a good season. I still think that if you've got Kudus and Bowen, you should be scoring in most games you play in. I think Paqueta and or Soler will start in this game, which gives them some progression through midfield. So there's still reasons to be positive about West Ham, but I think last weekend was a bit of a wake-up call for Julen 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏 that he needs to settle on what his best team is. He needs to settle on what the team is going to play like. And still having no Niclas Füllkrug. I doubt he actually wanted Niclas Füllkrug, frankly. But if you're going to spend £20 million on a Champions League finalist striker, I would imagine he's going to have to be in the first team at some point, and he's not going to be fit for this weekend. I hope West Ham put Bowen central striker and don't try and continue with Antonio, who is, you know, a legendary figure at the club in lots of ways, but he's looking like a 34-year-old centre forward. He's looking like someone who is physically not what he was. He's not in good form. And yeah, I just don't know if West Ham can continue with that. In terms of Chelsea, as you mentioned, they didn't play well last week. However, I was impressed by them defensively, I've got to say. I think Robert Sanchez, who's not my favourite goalkeeper, saved a penalty, made some really good saves. I find him to be a very inconsistent goalkeeper. He's not great at dealing with corners, but all of that seemed to go last week. Some great stops, very commanding. Maybe the penalty save gave him a kind of psychological boost that he needs, but I'm not wildly impressed by him. And I think Chelsea's front line still, it doesn't make sense yet. And I think it will because these are quality players. But last week it was Madueke, Palmer, Neto and Jackson to start the game. Jackson remains not a striker. And 𝐿𝐭𝐿 comes on, still not quite a striker. João Felix comes on, looks a little bit off the pace. You know, that doesn't quite make sense to me. In the midfield, Caicedo, I think, was captain against Bournemouth. I don't really understand that. And it left you, I think, with Vega starting last week because Gallagher has gone and Enzo Fernandez unavailable. So, yeah, midfield has been an issue. Defense better than expected, and the attack underperforming. So it's all strange for Chelsea. In this particular game, it's a massive game for West Ham. As you mentioned, 2 straight defeats at home, City and Villa. I mean, come on, not the easiest of games they could have had. And they were in both games for long spells. And Chelsea, I still think they're behind West Ham in terms of development, even though West Ham are have a weaker squad, let's say. So I think West Ham at 3.25, considering this is a huge game for them. They won it last year. They've got a good record at home against Chelsea in recent years. I think that's one to take, and I will be taking that. Double your money for a West Ham win. If you want to find ways West Ham win, Jarrod Bowen scores and West Ham win. It seems a pretty consistent thing that happens these days. Bowen involved in the goal and West Ham win brings you up around 5. If you're looking at Chelsea, look low scoring. That would be something like 1-0, 2-1, nothing above 4.5 in this game. I don't see it being a goal fest, but I would aim for Chelsea by scoring 2 goals. But I quite fancy West Ham.
Okay, great odds in this game. Chelsea, as I said, is still so difficult to bet on them. They are playing conference this season, remember, and still some good results and some bad results in the start of the season. The opposite for Aston Villa. They are having a great start of the season. We had trust on them in our Champions League show, and they smashed Young Boys. It's true that 𝗵𝗿 made a couple of saves at the beginning of the game, but then cruising and also beat Everton. That game was a thriller, not a Unai Emery's style performance. We've been saying this for a while, but Aston Villa is a very entertaining team to watch. A lot of chances in both boxes, and your bet, Tom, crazy bet, John Duran to score the last goal, came in. What a bet. What do you expect? Because against Wolves, they are massive favorites. Only 1 point for Wolves.
Yeah, Midlands rivalry as well in this game. So there's an added spice to it that might raise Wolverhampton Wanderers' game. Look, Villa, even though they went 2-0 down last week, there wasn't a person in the world that thought they weren't going to win. And maybe that's an Everton thing, which we'll get to later, but it's also a Villa thing. You got a lot of trust in Villa right now because they're able to work their way out of bad situations. Watkins was fantastic last weekend, his best performance of the season. Morgan Rogers, I think, has probably been the best player in the Premier League in the opening few weeks of the campaign. The balance of Tielemans and Onana, Konsa and Torres at centre-half look good. So loads and loads of positives around them. And I think that even despite the exertions against Young Boys in midweek in the Champions League, you'd still make them favourites for this one to overwhelm Wolverhampton Wanderers, who, you know, I was impressed actually with their performance for long spells against Newcastle. I've been impressed with them at different points this season, but I say this a lot about the Premier League. We have kind of built it up to be a coaches' league in a lot of ways because of Guardiola and Klopp and this great rivalry. It's not a coaches' league. It's a players' league. Has been for a long, long time. The best players in the world play in the Premier League because they pay the best wages. Players who are playing at Newcastle and Wolverhampton Wanderers are good enough to play for, I don't know, Juventus and Atletico Madrid in another era, but they won't go there. They'll go here because the money's better. And Wolves don't have the players. And that's the big issue. A coach will only get you so far. Dawson and Mosquera is not a Premier League quality central defensive pairing. Sam Johnson is a championship goalkeeper. Bellegarde, Lamina, you know, they're good players. They're not great players. And that will get you unstuck in the end when the opposition have great players. And Villa have great players and Wolves don't. So it's going to be a derby sort of game. So I'd expect goals at both ends. And I'm going to go Aston Villa. And John Duran, you know, we've spoken about him already. 3 winners in 4 games. Had a great strike, I think, disallowed against Young Boys in the end that would have made it 3. Duran to score. He'll start on the bench. And Villa win is my top tip for this one. Second tip, go with it again. Duran to score the last goal as he has in 3 of 4 games. Come off the bench and score a goal. It's happening regularly, so keep on that until it stops happening. So 2 John Duran bets. Look at Watkins as well. Scored 2 last week in the Premier League. Watkins to score and Villa win is around 2.88. I'll get to 2-1. And I don't discount the draw here as well, but I think all sorts of Villa victory would be my top 2 or 3 tips.
3 wins, 1 defeat for Aston Villa against Arsenal. Great start of the season in a very challenging one, the one that they are playing Champions League. Next game, Fulham, Newcastle. Also great start of the season for Newcastle. 10 points, same as Arsenal. They beat in the latest game of last match day. Wolves also beat Spurs before that. Fulham, I would say also good start of the season, 5 points. The only defeat came at Old Trafford in the last minutes of the game. Perhaps this could be one of those that screams draw, both teams to score 1-1, something like this.
Yeah, maybe. I think that Fulham have been better than we expected. I think that's been something that's happened a lot of seasons with Fulham because, I mean, the team itself, 𝐿𝐿𝐴𝐵𝐿𝐴, Smith Rowe, 𝗛𝗲𝗏𝗀 𝗀𝗏, Raul Jimenez, a real cavalcade of yesterday's men in the attacking positions for Fulham. And in midfield, they've lost 𝗀 𝗀𝐿𝐴 has stepped up and he's played reasonably well in the opening weeks of the season. Beyond Joachim Andersen, it's a kind of worse version of last season's team. So, full credit to Fulham for the way they played in the opening few weeks. Certainly better than West Ham for long spells. Inspired by Emile Smith Rowe, the other of the new signings in the starting 11. He was fantastic for an hour against West Ham last week. No surprise when he started to fade. Fulham started to fade. And I expect him to have a similar impact, certainly in the first half here. The question for me remains twofold, as it was last week. Number one, 𝐿𝐵𝐿𝐴 is an accident waiting to happen. Last weekend, West Ham did not capitalise on the couple of Bassi howlers, one where he lost the ball in his own area, one where he lost it on the halfway line and Soler fouled him when if he'd won it, West Ham would have been through on goal. So I have my issues there. And as we mentioned, offensively, if Smith Rowe goes off, Rodrigo Muniz has not hit the ground running and Raul Jimenez, though he scored last week, has got an hour in him. So there are issues there for Fulham to solve. In terms of Newcastle, really impressed, I've got to say. I was underwhelmed going into Wolverhampton Wanderers, but having watched that game, they have got a real bunch of maverick players. It's classic Newcastle. I loved the comparison to 𝗷𝗵𝗿𝗲𝗀 goal last week, to David Ginola's famous goal for Newcastle. I think it was at Hillsborough in '95, wearing the same kit, cut inside, dummy, and then put it in the corner. Very similar in aesthetic, and of course the kit is modelled on that as well, so it looked good. Up front, I think Harvey Barnes remains on the bench and comes on. When you can get that front three of Gordon, Isak and Barnes, very threatening. And I think Joelinton, Guimaraes and Longstaff, they've been in that midfield three for a long time now. They know each other's games. They're all back in the team together again, and they look pretty strong. I still have my doubts about the strongest defensive line for Newcastle, but there's a confidence about them right now that I really like. 2 scores here. Number one, I'm going to go the same scoreline for both of these teams of last weekend. So if we start with Fulham, if they're going to get something, it'll be a draw. I think a draw where both teams to score, but draw at 3.5 is nice. I think they're able to score 1. I don't think Fulham are able to score 2. And I think if they can keep Newcastle down 2-1, there you go. You've got your draw. The other scoreline will be the same for Newcastle winning at Wolves. I can see them winning by 2-1. They will concede, but they've got more goals in them than Fulham have. An end of the game, as we saw last week. Gordon, Barnes, Isak coming forward. Newcastle and both teams to score is 4. So I'm taking that too.
Both teams to score alone is 1.56, and the head-to-head between these two teams is dominated by Newcastle. Last season they won all 3 games because they also played in the FA Cup 2-0. So history tells us that Newcastle is good in this type of fixtures. Next game, Liverpool, Bournemouth. Liverpool suffered the first defeat. We didn't expect that against Forest, but then they reacted in San Siro, even if they conceded an early goal. The set pieces were very important for Liverpool. Now playing against Bournemouth, a team that could be dangerous. Tom, we just mentioned that their first defeat of the season was against Chelsea, and probably they deserve more. So probably it's not an easy game, this one, for the Reds.
No, I think it's going to be a real tough game for them. I still think they're going to win it, but I do think that Bournemouth are going to give them a great game, as Bournemouth gave Chelsea last week. I mean, look, Liverpool's result last week against Forest was a shock. I think some of the way that Nuno managed the game was really impressive, which we'll get to when we speak about Nottingham Forest. But it was also quite telling that Arne Slot didn't quite have the answers for what Nuno was doing. He didn't have the answers for the changes Nuno made on the hour, where he brought on more offensive-minded players, whereas most managers, certainly in the Premier League, bring on more defensive-minded players to try and see the game through. So that was interesting. It was the first sort of tactical failure of Arne Slot, but it's one of those things. He's been there 2 or 3 weeks. He's going to make errors like that. It might cost them in the first quarter of the season, and it certainly did cost them last weekend. I don't quite know if they can change anything, frankly, in terms of the starting 11. I was surprised about how much they were wibbling on about 𝗵𝗵𝗄𝐿 after the game. Oh, no, 𝗵𝗵𝗄𝐿 meant we had to change everything. Are you sure about that? Like, that was a bit strange. So I expect pretty much the same 11 that played against Forest last week. I think that they'll need to be more switched on. They need to be a bit more clever. And I'd still like to see for Liverpool 𝐿𝐿axis McAllister playing further up the field. He's sort of, since he's been there, been a lot deeper than he used to be at Brighton than he has been for Argentina, because they don't have someone to play in that role. And he sort of developed that role as a sort of deep-lying sort of number 6 player. And I'd like to see him more in a number 8 role, maybe in a number 10 role, creating for Liverpool, because I think that was what was lacking last week. And some of the rotations didn't quite work. 𝗏𝗏 with Salah and Diaz didn't quite work. I think it will come together. Last week was a bit of an anomaly. And in terms of Bournemouth, you know, they outplayed Chelsea, right? They outplayed them. They were better than them. They were more intense than them. They had enough chances to win the game. But again, I go back to a previous point. This is not a coach's league. It's a players' league. And is Andoni Iraola a great coach? Yeah, he looks real good, looks real clever, looks real smart, looks like someone who can coach a team through some of those mid-table, even-Steven sorts of games. But in this game, it's where the players come to the fore. And Evanilson looks all right. It's not Solanke. That's a huge drop-off. He might get to the level that Solanke was at, the level of output Solanke was offering. But he's not there yet. And that's going to be an issue for Bournemouth over the next few weeks. I think that having to play Mark Travers last week instead of 𝗏𝗏, not a massive drop-off. 𝗏𝗏's not amazing. But if 𝗏𝗏's going to be the number 1, you've got to start getting that balance right. And he hadn't played more than 1 game before he was unable to play again. So, look, I think that Bournemouth are better than the sum of their parts, but in the end, the parts matter. Go with the Liverpool win if you're going to make some money here. Nice group bet. Be conservative. 1-0, 2-0, 2-1 brings you at 3.25. I do fancy Bournemouth for a goal, despite the fact that they don't necessarily have someone that excites me. You can just see Liverpool conceding. They're conceding soft goals in lots of games. It's something that affected the back end of Klopp's era. It's affecting the start of Slot's. So Liverpool and both teams to score brings you at 2.5. But look for Liverpool, look for late goals, and maybe look at Bournemouth scoring first.
Well, last season also Liverpool won all 3 games. In this case, we have to add the League Cup game that they won at Bournemouth. Liverpool, great start also in the Champions League. Next one, let's go to the south. Southampton, Ipswich, already relegation 6-pointers, 2 teams that are newly promoted and they haven't started well. Southampton, 0 points, lost to Man United, missed a penalty, only 1 goal scored so far. Ipswich, 2 points, more positive, especially the point against Brighton that we didn't expect.
Yeah, look, I mean, I'm not impressed with Southampton, I've got to say. I know it was Man United last week and they had a flurry of chances in the opening half hour or so, but I've not been impressed by what I've seen. The back line is not good enough. Jack Stevens suspended for this one, having been sent off last week, the captain. He's not a Premier League quality player. Jan Bednarek is not a Premier League quality player. Not seeing anything in 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏 to make me think he's going to be good enough. Dibbling was maybe their best player last week, but again, good championship player maybe. There's just not a great deal of quality there. And if they're going to try and play the ball around, have 50, 60% possession, they won't get 20 points. They've got to toughen up immediately, and they've got to get something from this game. It's as crucial as that. Ipswich at home is a must-win if you're going to stay in the Premier League. And if they're going to be in a battle with each other, at the very least, it must not lose this match. I know it's early, but Ipswich at home is a gimme for everyone. You've got to get it. And I just don't see it at the moment. Cameron Archer missed a penalty last week, an atrocious penalty. Ben Brereton Diaz is a jinx. He still hasn't won in his time in the Premier League. So all sorts of issues there for Southampton. I think they'll try and dominate the ball. The trouble is, Ipswich are better in possession. They have better ball-playing midfielders. They have better confidence, and also they've got goal scorers. I really like 𝐿𝐵𝗵𝗻𝗏 up front. Nearly scored a wonder goal last weekend against Brighton. I really like 𝐼𝐸. I really like Hutchinson. And defensively too, I mentioned 𝐜𝐭𝐿𝐵 a couple of weeks ago. I think he's destined for the top, the centre-half at Ipswich Town, brought from Hull. I think he's fantastic. I think in 𝗀𝐿𝐴, though I'm not the biggest of fans of him personally, I think his experience of being at Burnley last season will help Greaves alongside him, who's not got top-level experience. And even 𝗵𝐸, who, again, I'm not a fan of from his time at Burnley, had a good game last week against Brighton. So that'll be a confidence booster for him. He's a good keeper when it comes to making saves. Bad goalkeeper with the ball at feet. So stop giving it to him. Let's hope they do. So, firstly, screams draw. 3.4 for the draw. Screams 1-1 draw, frankly. And Ipswich got a 0-0 draw last week. So I think they're already becoming savvy to what this league is. Just get points on the board, build a platform, and go from there. I think Ipswich are getting that. And Southampton so far currently aren't. If I was to pick a winner, I'd say Ipswich Town. You get them at 3. Really nice. Because they've got goal scorers. They're better defensively. And I think if you look at last season too, Ipswich were better than Southampton. And so I think you look at last season and you look at the start to this, I quite fancy Ipswich to take on a Southampton side and beat them. I think there's a negativity around Southampton. I think people already know the writings on the wall for them to go down. And if you're picking a goal scorer, again, I like 𝐿𝐵𝗵𝗻𝗏 anytime at 3.25. I'll take that.
Well, if we are talking about relegation, Tom, and about jinx, Everton is our next team. Leicester City, Everton, another relegation 6-pointer. Leicester City with only 2 points. They missed a great chance to win in Selhurst Park. Stupid penalty in the extra time when they were 2-0 up. And Everton's second consecutive game, they are 2-0 ahead, and they ended up losing against Aston Villa last weekend, against Everton. Before that, 13 goals conceded in only 4 games. That's a lot.
Yes, things are not looking great for Everton right now. Look, we'll get to them in a second. Briefly on Leicester, Jamie Vardy scoring against Crystal Palace was super fun last week. You know, we're getting a roll back the years start to the season for Jamie Vardy scoring goals and just being incredibly obnoxious to the opposition support. Classic Vardy. And I think with him scoring goals, Leicester have a chance. Got to get as many points on the board in the opening 10 as possible, because when we get to Christmas, it's going to be a monumental slog for the teams down the bottom. Getting out of it when you're in it after 10 games is a season-long thing. So as many points right now as you can. Absolutely crucial to keep that early season momentum and positivity. Beyond that, not seeing a great deal in Leicester, to be honest. I think the way 𝐿𝐴 gave that penalty away last week was the sign of someone who maybe shouldn't be in the Premier League anymore. It was a really terrible giveaway, a vital moment from someone who's supposed to be an experienced hand at the wheel, right? It was the exact opposite of what you needed from 𝐿𝐴 at that moment. Offensively, Navidi's had some moments. Jamie Vardy we mentioned. Beyond that, I don't see much attacking threat when it comes to Leicester City. The trouble is you don't need that much with Everton. Look, I will say this for Everton. I didn't see their loss in the Carabao Cup against Southampton in midweek on penalties, but I did work on the Villa game. And of course, we all watched the Bournemouth game. They're not playing that bad. That's the funny thing. They're not playing that badly. I have seen them play so much worse than this. And to be fair, I hear they were awful against Southampton in midweek, but Sean Dyche don't care about the Carabao Cup. So maybe that's what that was about. I think 𝗵𝗵𝗀𝐻𝐿𝐵𝗵𝗻 looked very sharp last week, scored 1, could have had a hat-trick. I think Dwight McNeil, who is a bit of an in-and-out sort of player, has started the season well. I think it's important that Michael Keane is dropped and they bring in the big Irish centre-half, O'Brien, to come in to replace him, because Michael Keane just is not good enough for this division. And I think in every game, a goal is his fault. And I think the balance of the back line, 𝗏𝐿𝐴, O'Brien, look, stick with the 4. They went to 3 last week at the back when it was 2-2, and it killed them. It totally killed them. They went too defensive, and they couldn't shut the game down. And when Duran scored that wonder goal, it was over for them. Be more brave. They've got players who can score, can create. I was really impressed by Timo Rebbenham last week in midfield, who I'd never really rated before. So they're playing well. They're scoring goals. If you're scoring goals, you've got a chance. The trouble is, how do you get over the psychological damage of what's happened to them over the last couple of weeks? And I think that will, again, come to the fore in this game. Take a Leicester win at 2.5. Jamie Vardy has scored 2 in the opening 4 Vardy scores and Leicester win is 4.5. And go 3-2. Sod it. Do it. Go Leicester 3, Everton 2. Go Everton to score first and Leicester win. I always like to bet on runs when they're happening. And if they're happening, try and get on it before the train comes off the tracks, right? So Leicester score first. Everton score first and Leicester win. That'll bring you in like 7 or 8. It's big money and it's happened twice in a row in the Premier League. So why not?
Well, Everton, they are in the losing trend, that's for sure. Even in the League Cup, they were knocked out by Southampton, so they don't win any single game. Next one, Tottenham, Brentford, Spurs, I guess disappointed after losing the derby. Probably the fair result was a draw, but still they didn't have many chances. It's not a great start, only 4 points. You have to add up also the bad games at the end of the season, of the last season. I didn't like 𝐿𝐴𝐵𝐻𝐿𝐴, especially against Arsenal. Their only win was against Everton, and Brentford, Tom, could be dangerous. They were tough against Man City. It wasn't also easy for Liverpool to beat them. So I guess it won't be easy also for Tottenham here.
No, I don't think it will be easy, but I will just shade for them because, I agree on your point on 𝐿𝐴𝐵𝐻𝐿𝐴. I think he was very disappointing last week, but last week he was against probably the best defensive partnership in the league in a very hotly contested derby. That is a tough place to come into when you've gone to a new club and you're not quite sure what you do in this team yet. There are some mitigating circumstances. I think 𝐿𝐴𝐵𝐻𝐿𝐴 will come good. I think he'll be a really good signing, but yeah, I agree he was poor last week. Brennan Johnson was poor as well. Scored in midweek in the Carabao Cup against Coventry City, so that might give him some confidence. I think Wilson 𝗀𝗏𝗿𝗏, who would have come in for him, has got injured. I would imagine maybe 𝗀𝐿𝐴𝐵𝐻𝐿𝐴 might come into the front three and they bring someone else into midfield potentially for this one. The balance was all off against Arsenal. It was Maddison, 𝗀𝐿𝐴𝐵𝐻𝐿𝐴, Johnson, Solanke and Son, and they were all just sort of forward. And they vacated midfield, where Arsenal, though they had no Rice, were so dominant in the game. Jorginho ran the match in many ways, in my view. So they got the tactics wrong. They faded as the game went on, and there was an element of a lack of ability to change. Still no Richarlison injured for Tottenham, who came on and had some bench impacts last season. So the squad looks a bit under, and they don't quite know what they are at this point. So there are elements there that are concerning. But I do think in this particular game, they're going to be able to score a few goals against Brentford, or at the very least score enough goals to win, because Brentford, last week it was an impressive performance, but it was made impressive because they were able to score the first goal. You do that, you've got a chance. 𝐬𝐭𝐚𝐲 scored that goal, injured. We're talking 2 or 3 months for 𝐬𝐭𝐚𝐲. They have sold Ivan Toney, as we know. They signed the centre forward. Was it Josh Da Silva, I think, the forward? And he's injured. So it leaves you with Bryan Mbeumo, and that's it in terms of players who can score a goal. They've got some decent players, Brentford. The defence has looked all right in the opening couple of weeks of the season. Van den Berg has looked an astute signing. They needed someone a bit more agile. There may be someone like 𝐿𝐴𝐻𝐿𝐴 or 𝗵𝐵𝐵 last season. So that's a smart signing. But at the moment, I think Brentford are going to struggle. They're going to struggle to score goals. They're going to struggle to win games. And I think they'll have to low block their way to a few 1-0 shankers across the season. They're going to try and do that here, and I don't think they'll do it. Tottenham need something. Maybe the Coventry win in midweek was a moment that's going to change the season. The offence needs to come good. Everyone bar Richarlison is fit. I'll take Tottenham to win here and over conservative 2.5 goals in the match. That brings you 2-1. That brings you 3-1. Brings you 3-0. There's a few scorelines there I like for Tottenham. And I think as the game goes on, they will score a few goals against Brentford, who will have no way to respond. Nice group bet here. 1-0, 2-0, 2-1, 3.5. And I do think Brentford will score because Tottenham are so bad at defending set pieces and corners. I haven't got the stat in front of me now, but it's like 15 goals conceded. Of their last 50 goals conceded, 15 have been from set pieces. That's corners and free kicks popped onto someone's head. That's how 𝗵𝗵𝗄 scored last week. Brentford very good at that. So Brentford, I think, will score. It'll be from a corner, but Tottenham will score more.
Scored so easy, actually. Gabriel, a big mistake from the defense, even if someone said that he was pushed from behind. And the late kickoff on Saturday, Crystal Palace, Man United. Good week for Man United. A big win in the League Cup. Also beat Southampton. We saw Garnacho scoring. Let's see if he has a problem with the manager or not. Also, Rashford scored a good goal in St. Mary's. And they have to win in the south of London because Crystal Palace, they had a really bad start, only with 2 points. And as we said, they were lucky to grab that draw against Leicester City.
Yeah, they have started badly. And I think the back end of last season gave a lot of certainly pundits and fans some sort of, well, the hope's the right word, I don't know, that Palace would have a good season. But to lose 𝐿𝐸 and not be able to replace him was a significant problem. I think 𝐬𝐭𝐴𝐺 coming in is a different sort of player, and I don't know how he works with Mateta at this moment in time. 𝐬𝐭𝐴𝐺 won't be happy to be sort of the wide man to Mateta's central striker, so we'll see how that goes. And defensively, the back three, 𝗀𝐿𝐴 in centre-half. First time I saw him last week against Leicester, wasn't particularly impressed. Mark Gay had a nightmare game, having failed to get his move to Newcastle, and Nathaniel Klein in the defensive three. I know he's had some good games, but for me in the long term, I don't think that works. So I think they have got worse from last season, player for player. They've certainly lost that bounce of Oliver Glasner coming in to replace, was it really Roy Hodgson last season? What kind of world are we living in? That feels like about 40 years ago, that reference. But yeah, I'm concerned about what Palace are. I think they'll finish 12th and be fine, but 𝗀𝗏𝗄 and Wharton's going to be a good balance, and I think eventually that will come good. I'd probably drop the kind of 3-4-2-1 thing they've been doing, go back to 4 at the back, and everyone does their jobs properly, and move on from there. That would mean there's no place for maybe someone like 𝐵𝗏𝗏, but I think they'll cope without him. Find someone else to play on the right wing, and you've got a better balance there. We'll see what they do. In terms of Manchester United, the Southampton test last week, the exact score we predicted last week, right? 3-0 victory. We thought they would win 2-0. We thought they would win comfortably. I think I went 2 and it ended up being 3, but a comfortable victory in the end. And it was what they needed. The perfect fixture at the perfect time, as was the midweek game as well in the Carabao Cup. Just a couple of easy wins. Everyone get their eye in, score a couple of goals, start to feel happy again. Rashford scoring last week. I'm not sure he meant that shot, but that normally starts a run for him. And a few more minutes for 𝐿𝐴𝐵𝗎, a few more minutes for de Ligt and Martinez to play together at centre-half. I think there are some doubts maybe about Martinez for this game, having gone off last week. Should be okay. I've not seen the Erik ten Hag press conference yet, but let's hope he is. Because if you can get the back group together as many times as possible, Mazraoui, de Ligt, Martinez, and it'll be 𝗛𝗏 still out. Get that group working together, game after game after game after game. I think that's a really good back four. In midfield, get the Ugarte and Mainoo partnership going. Play it again and again and again. Again, then improve, I think. And Christian Eriksen coming has made a big difference. I think if he is to remain in the team, I think he'd probably go into a more offensive position. Bruno Fernandes maybe gets pushed a bit further out wide. And they don't have maybe like Diallo on one side. So there are things that are positive to consider for Manchester United. And I think they go into this game as favourites, and I think they've got every chance of winning it. I'd be looking at here at Man United to win an over 2.5 goals. That would again mean 2-1 is covered, which I think is the scoreline it's probably going to be. You don't bet on exact scores, so find a way to make it work. 3.25 for that is really, really nice. I would absolutely be looking at Bruno Fernandes and Marcus Rashford, who have looked fantastic first couple of games. So Marcus Rashford to score and Man United to win. An old school bet, but one that's come in 2 games in a row. So why not make it 3 in a row? Look for the runs, look for the form. And don't just count the draw as well at 3.5. But I do think Rashford and Man U, those are your safe bets.
Well, I had to double check the odds because 2.4 for Man United to win, I think, is really, really high. Really good odds. Even if last year they lost both games to Crystal Palace 4-0 at Selhurst Park and even 1-0 at Old Trafford, but they should be considered, of course, as favourites. And still 2.4 for Man United to win is a great price. Also, I find really good odds to back the away team in Brighton, Nottm Forest, 4.75. Nuno Espiritu Santos men to win, and or even a double chance could be a good option. Both teams with 8 points, great start, undefeated. But I guess our eyes are on Forest after beating Liverpool and Southampton away. We know Nuno Espiritu Santos' style, all 4 games under 2.5 goals. We saw Brighton that couldn't score against Ipswich. So I guess we shouldn't expect a goal feast here.
No, I wouldn't expect goals at both ends or many goals. I'd certainly look at the under 3.5 market in the game and pick a winner on top of that. Look, let's start with Nottingham Forest. I mean, what a result last week. What a performance last week. And there were some great moments from the coach Nuno, who has, I think, quite rightly been disparaged for some career choices that he has made, the Tottenham sacking, the going to Saudi Arabia. And all of that, you know, he has made a bit of a joke of himself from some of the things that he has done. But we forget that his Wolverhampton Wanderers team are one of the most astute and clever newly promoted teams that we have had in the Premier League across the last decade. So he is a good coach, and I think maybe he's found the right place in Nottingham Forest in season 3 in the Premier League to re-establish himself. I think that James Ward-Prowse is a very clever signing alongside Ryan Yates, who's a bit of a blunt instrument, but do a lot of running for you. I think Milenkovic from Fiorentina, £12 million, an insane low amount of money for someone of his qualities. And that's brilliant negotiation from Forest, not so great from Fiorentina. And Chris Wood, they have a goal scorer in Gibbs-White. I think they've got one of the best sort of number 10s in the league. So last week as well, he was brave, Nuno. He had Dominguez and Anderson, who'd done a heck of a lot of running in midfield. And he was like, right, take them off on the hour or so at Anfield. Shall we go defensive? No, he brings on Elanga and Hudson-Odoi to give threat, to make Liverpool worry. It leads to the goal from Callum Hudson-Odoi in their first win at Anfield since 1969. So fantastic stuff from Forest start of this season. And across the back end of last and start of this, it's 4 away wins in a row, which is why I'm stunned to see the odds. I had it at 4.5. It's got up, as you say, since then. So fantastic odds this weekend for Forest to win. And that is worth a punt on current form. I'm just going to take it. Nottingham Forest to win at Brighton. The odds are too good not to have a cheeky little bet on that. In terms of Brighton, no great challenge yet so far this season. I think we have been impressed by them in terms of picking up points unexpectedly, but I'm interested to see how they get on over the long term here. We always underestimate Brighton. I'm the most guilty person in the world when it comes to underestimating Brighton. But if you look at their run of games, Everton away currently right now is a bit of a gimme. They face Man United at the exact right time. Arsenal maybe their biggest test. They got a good point there. But when they became favourites to win the game for the first time against Ipswich, couldn't get it done. Couldn't get over the line. Couldn't beat a low block. Struggled. And I think maybe 𝐿𝗵𝗿𝗄𝗏 could have nicked it for Ipswich last week. So it's going to be interesting to see how Brighton set up in this game. Go into it as favourites for the second game running. The midfield balance looked off last week. And they, 𝗀𝗏𝗏, who came in, I think, for an injured player, was it Milner against Arsenal, started last week. It looked like he was a bit overwhelmed by the league. Danny Welbeck started the season well, but don't expect a season of form from Danny Welbeck at his age. That's understandable. And at times they can look susceptible to balls over the top. And I think Hudson-Odoi and Elanga could really capitalise on Brighton's high line. So if you're going to go Brighton, I think you go both teams to score. But if you're going to go for Nottingham Forest, take it straight up and down. And I'd certainly look at the under 3.5 goals market here.
And the game of the games, Tom, Man City, Arsenal. Last year, as I said, it was a bit disappointing. Arsenal sat very deep and they played for the draw. At the end, they got the draw. And I remember you mentioned it, that they had to go for the win at the beginning of this video. You keep saying the same thing, that Arsenal should go to Man City and win. Guardiola's men struggle against Inter, a team that also sat deep, but allowed some counter-attacks. Inter had their chances. Haaland didn't score, didn't almost shoot on target, only one shot on target in that game. But we know Haaland is on fire in the Premier League. First 2 tough games of this season for Man City, Inter and Arsenal. What do you expect here? Perhaps a low-scoring game? It should pay well, actually, a low-scoring game, KG1.
Yeah, definitely take low scoring. Absolutely take low scoring in this game. Look, I think it's about time everyone started catching up with what's been happening with Man City over the last 7 or 8 years. They have raised the average. They have raised the average amount of points it takes to be champions. It's around 94, 95 points across City's title wins to be champions. That's what you need. Last couple of years, 89, 91, but still huge points tallies. And there's not many games they can lose, right? They might lose 2 against Liverpool. They might lose 2 against Arsenal. They might lose 1 against Man United. They might lose 1 against Tottenham. Beyond that, where are they going to lose? Who are they going to lose to, right? That is the concern here. So Arsenal, to be champions, need to beat Manchester City twice, and they need to get 95 points. That means they can drop 19 points this season. I know it's ridiculous, right? But that's where we are. And City have set that bar. And if you don't beat them, you're relying on someone else to beat them. So West Ham now got to beat City for them, or Wolves got to beat them in some anomalous game in October. It hasn't happened enough over the last 8 years for it to happen. So that's why I was disappointed last season in Arsenal. Everyone was telling me it was a good point. It wasn't, because the goal is to beat Man City in the league. The goal is to get 95 points. The goal is to stop them getting points and you get points. And so to not win that game, it doesn't matter how good your tactics were and how impressed we all were with the performance. That's the mission. And, you know, it's funny. I went to the North London derby last week and it was a very Mourinho-like performance in his pomp era from 04 to 05. The solidity defensively at Arsenal is fantastic. They don't really look much like scoring in games, but if they score on you, you're finished. And I think that's going to be really intriguing here. It isn't going to be a all-out attack sort of game from Arsenal. They are going to low block. Everyone has to when they go to Manchester City. Ødegaard injured, ligament damage, missing for 2 months. That's a huge problem, obviously. But Declan Rice comes back in from suspension. So it's going to be Rice, Partey, and another. I would personally have 𝐬𝐭𝐴 following his brilliant performance last week. But there are other options that Arteta can do. But they just have to win this game. In terms of Manchester City, I mean, have they been amazing start of the season? Not really. Have they been particularly coherent start of the season? Not really. Are they ever? But they've got Haaland scoring, and he's been the difference maker. And that's why you pay him these enormous wages to be your striker, because he remains a difference maker. If a chance comes, he will get it. If there's 5 chances in the game, he will have them all and score 3 of them. The average is mental for what Haaland is able to do. So I think it's going to be an even game. I don't think it's going to be a goal fest. These games between these two are not like the Klopp Guardiola games of City, Liverpool past. They're tight, they're cautious, they're cagey. It will be settled by a corner or a penalty or a late tap in or the odd goal in 3, right? And for me, I would still just shade Manchester City. Man City and under 3.5 goals in the match brings you in at 2.5. City and both teams to score brings you in just over double your money. 2-1 feels like the scoreline it's going to be. And I think you've got to look at how City win the game. Haaland scoring the first goal is 4 on its own. Take that. It keeps on happening. Haaland scores and City win 2.63. It's happened in every Premier League game this season. So take it. In terms of Arsenal, if you do fancy them, again, go the under. Arsenal to win is fine, but go the under and Arsenal to win. That's under 2.5, maybe under 3.5. Be really conservative. You'll do okay there. But if they're going to win it, they'll be from a corner. They're terrific at corners. They're deadly from corners. They're winning games, scoring corners and shutting up shop as they did last week. And that leaves me 2 bets. Gabriel, anytime goal scorer, is 13. Saliba, anytime goal scorer, is 21. Now, they're unlikely because of the odds you've heard. However, in this game, they're going to play to win by scoring from a corner. That is the tactic. That is what they're going to do. And if they're going to score from a corner, those are the 2 guys that do it. So I personally think City in a 2-1 low scorer. If Arsenal are going to do it, back them from a corner.
Well, Rice is back. Let's see if De Bruyne is fit, because he left the pitch against Inter. Probably he picked up an injury. Foden had some rest in the Champions League. Probably he will start. I didn't see Savinho really fit in that game against Inter. What a game this one. Remember last season, Arsenal won 1-0 at the Emirates, and then we saw a goalless draw at the Etihad. But if we see the head-to-head in Oddspedia in the last 7 years, 14 wins for Man City, only 1 draw and 3 wins for the Gunners, great game. This one, of course, Man City, Arsenal, all eyes on the Etihad. Tom Rennie, all eyes on you and your safe bet.
Yeah, safe bet this week. It's not the safest of weekends, frankly, but I'm going to take Liverpool to win at home against Bournemouth. I know they lost their last home game against Nottm Forest, but I think they'll bounce back in the Premier League here. So Liverpool, home win.
Okay, and your ACCA?
The ACCAs have been annoying me recently because I've been going too bold. And why did I put West Ham in last week? What an idiot. So look, no West Ham or random bets this week. 3 favourites to win. Liverpool, Tottenham, City. All at home, to win, treble, 3.28. Double your money.
Thank you, Tom. Let's enjoy this Premier League match day 5 and, of course, Man City, Arsenal. Goodbye.